Honourable Senators, I rise today to speak to the third reading of Bill C-11, the online streaming bill. After 31 years, it is undoubtedly time to update the Broadcasting Act. Media and technology in Canada have changed significantly throughout that time. But the Trudeau government's Bill C-11 doesn't really modernize the Broadcasting Act. It just takes an already outdated framework and transposes it onto the modern digital world where it doesn't fit. Of course, the Trudeau government has used this opportunity to meddle in the free and democratic flow of information to Canadians online, an opportunity this government could simply never pass up. In the last Parliament, the Liberal government introduced Bill C-10, a bill seen to give the CRTC the power to regulate free expression of content on the Internet. That bill died on the order paper when the Prime Minister called his unnecessary election in 2021. But a near-carbon copy of it was resurrected as Bill C-11 in this Parliament. I had participated in one of the Senate Transport and Communications Committee marathon 3-hour clause-by-clause meetings on this bill and witnessed firsthand what a disaster this bill is. The government claims that Bill C-11 will not regulate everyday use of social media, including amateur content, implying that it will not apply to individual creators. However, the government has inserted Section 4.1 sub 2 of the bill, which allows the CRTC to make regulations regarding programs which, quote, generate revenue, quote, which can effectively include those individual Canadian YouTube and TikTok creators. At the same time, delegating the government's authority for regulation making to the CRTC allows the Trudeau government to once again dodge accountability for its actions and decisions. If controversy arises from any of the independent CRTC's regulations, the government will claim distance. Conveniently, the CRTC itself is not known for its transparency. It shares this trait with the Trudeau government. One witness, Monica Auer, the executive director of the Forum for Research and Policy and Communications, described the CRTC this way at the Senate Committee pre-study on Bill C-11, quote, "In terms of accountability and transparency, the problem with the CRTC right now is that it is not making its decisions public. Every year, it's publishing dozens of decisions that you can't see because there's no hyperlink and they don't publish. When we say that the CRTC is transparent, it is simply not. It is holding public hearings without witnesses. When you talk about the transfer of ownership and half of BC's radio stations through an administrative decision and no public hearing, I think I would challenge the notion that the CRTC is A, transparent, B, open, and C, accountable. It is not," unquote. If the government wants to regulate Canadian user content on the Internet, it should admit to this. Canadians deserve to know what the aim is here, and the government should be held accountable for that policy decision. Hiding behind vaguely worded legislation that delegates decision-making to a supposedly independent board that holds closed-door meetings and only answers back to the minister, that is not transparent or accountable. When Bill C-11 reached the Senate last June, its sponsor, Senator Dawson, didn't even speak to it for 3 months. When he did speak, he used up all his 45 minutes of speaking time, and therefore other senators really had a minimal chance to ask him questions. The Leader of the government in the Senate didn't even give a speech on the bill at second reading, again denying the senators the opportunity to ask the government questions on this legislation. All this together has to make us stop and wonder, honourable senators, why is this Trudeau government so deathly afraid of scrutiny? Ultimately, Bill C-11 is the Trudeau government's method of achieving indirectly what it does not have the political will to do directly. Currently, diverse Canadian content producers are finding major success online, effectively promoting themselves directly to a global audience without gatekeepers or intermediaries. With Bill C-11, the Trudeau government seeks to insert itself into the middle of that process and impose regulations. But it's like that old political joke. The 9 most terrifying words in the English language are, "I'm from the government and I'm here to help." The government's Canadian content regulations will have a devastating effect on the very Canadian users the government professes to be seeking to promote. There is a concern that if Canadian content is promoted to Canadian audiences, it will be considered an unfair advantage to Canadian content producers, and that platforms like YouTube, for example, will then limit the international exposure of those Canadian accounts out of a desire for fairness to other users. Similarly, other countries may implement similar content restrictions on their own domestic users in retaliation, thereby lowering potential Canadian audiences. Another problem is for our niche content producers. While the potential audience for a creator may be only a few thousand within Canada, there may be a much larger audience of potentially millions in the US or worldwide. The provisions of Bill C-11 could impede niche content creators from accessing that larger global market. For Canadian content producers that rely on foreign audiences, those offering tourism content, for example, Bill C-11 may direct content at the wrong target audience. This creates one of the biggest problems with Bill C-11 by pushing Canadian content on Canadian users rather than allowing for organic choice. A mismatch may be created for a social media user, making it more likely that they will ignore, navigate away from, or downvote the content. Doing so will negatively affect the algorithm, and that Canadian creator's video will therefore be less likely to be shown again. In this respect, creating these restrictions around Canadian content to promote Canadian work may end up having the exact opposite effect. Why is the Trudeau government insisting on limiting Canada's creators in this way, honourable senators? Canadian content producers have been actually quite successful online. It's like this government is trying to find answers in search of a problem that doesn't exist. Even for Canadian creators with well-established careers, social media platforms offer Canadian artists additional opportunities to market their works long after their initial popularity. For example, platforms like TikTok have created the opportunity for a second comeback for songs by Canadian artists that first topped the charts years ago. The Weeknd's hit Die For You first became a hit in 2016, but has re-emerged in the top 10 currently, thanks to exposure on TikTok. Vancouver rock band Mother Mother found similar success in 2020 with their 2008 hit song Hayloft because of the app. Such opportunities can help to sustain Canadian artists in a saturated and competitive market. Most importantly, this success hasn't come as the result of algorithmic manipulation, but rather organically. New and diverse Canadian entertainers and content providers are already finding great success in the democratization of the current online space. The only price of admission is access to an internet connection and an expansive imagination. Some of the top YouTubers in Canada include such creators as Evan Fong of Toronto, of Asian descent. His channel has more than 25.8 million viewers. Lily Singh of Punjabi descent from Scarborough was ranked 3rd in the Forbes list of the world's highest paid YouTubers. She currently has 14.6 million viewers. Lauren Rihamaki of Laura DIY is of Finnish, Ukrainian, and Japanese descent. She has over 8.4 million viewers on her channel. Shaina Novalinga, a young throat singer from Nunavut living in Montreal, has more than 4.1 million followers on TikTok. Steph Sanyati, who is trans, has Waardenburg syndrome and is partially deaf, is of Croatian and French background. She has more than 500,000 subscribers on YouTube. I could go on and on. Many of Canadians' most successful online creators come from diverse communities and export their unique content around the globe without any assistance or interference from the government. What Canadian creators need, in fact, is for the government to get out of their way. In my own hometown of Regina, we have the perfect example of a flourishing Canadian success story that might never have happened if these provisions in Bill C-11 were in place. Our own TikTok celebrity, Juno-nominated musician and creator Hitesh Sharma, better known as Tesher, built his music career online, first as a kid from his parents' home in Regina. He's now an international star, with his songs viewed hundreds of millions of times on TikTok. Last fall, he wrote a column about how Bill C-11 would have affected the path of his career, and I wanted to read it to you today. Tesher wrote, quote, "TikTok gave my music a global audience. Bill C-11 threatens that path. There is a moment during the Junos this year that will stick with me forever. I was performing Jalebi Baby with Simu Liu, and the crowd was singing along. About a minute into the performance, we exchanged a look, turned to the crowd, and broke into a Bhangra dance. The smile on my face said it all. Pure joy. That joy was tempered when I learned about Bill C-11, which will soon be voted on in the Senate. If passed as is, it could prevent digital-first Canadian artists from achieving that same success and joy I felt. My musical journey started in my hometown of Regina circa 2008, a kid messing around on a computer, mixing Bollywood songs with hip-hop tracks. I learned the music industry through trial and error because I didn't have the money or connections that opened doors. What I did have was determination and an internet connection. Eventually, I found TikTok. I loved the platform immediately and loved seeing people all over the world sharing, remixing, and mashing up content. There are no gatekeepers on TikTok. If your content is good and engaging, it finds an audience. Not only could I share my music with the world, but I could build a community that could engage with me and with my music. For a self-taught Indian kid from Saskatchewan with no industry connections, TikTok was a game changer. While I'm Canadian, my music first got noticed outside of Canada. My first global hit, Jalebi Baby, includes the Indian influences of my childhood, but also hints of reggaeton, salsa, Middle Eastern drums, and Eastern European synths. I sing in Hindi, Punjabi, and English. My music draws on global influences and musical traditions, so it benefited from being discovered globally. My journey is less traditional than the typical path into the music industry, and there may have been no path for me at all without the access and freedom that come from being a digital-first creator. These two things, access and freedom, simply weren't available to artists like me, who don't fit a certain mold. And I'm far from alone. Some of the most exciting voices I've discovered in the last couple of years, Canadian artists like Jessia and Johnny Orlando, have gained global followings and signed record deals, fueled by their ability to reach a massive audience through TikTok. Bill C-11 threatens that low-barrier path, one based on talent and audience preference rather than government-established quotas, by subjecting platforms like TikTok and the creators using it to outdated broadcasting and Canadian content rules. I'm building a career and exporting Canadian content globally despite those rules, not because of them. This path is what we should all want for Canadian artists. We want them to have the freedom to showcase globally our diverse, authentic Canadian culture. C-11 would limit that reach by requiring creators to prioritize government criteria for domestic distribution over making content optimized for global audiences. Within a year of being produced, Jalebi Baby was streaming on multiple platforms, including Canadian radio. I collaborated with megastar Jason Derulo on the video, was nominated by Breakthrough Artist of the Year at the Junos, and then there I was, performing live. The nomination was a huge honor, but to hit a Bhangra dance routine on national TV during Canada's biggest music night was unforgettable. I could never have imagined seeing someone who looked and sounded like me on stage when I was a kid. That's why I'm eager to protect opportunities and offer inspiration to the next generation of Canadians making music or art tutorials or comedy sketches. Aspiring creators should have the same chance I did to live their dreams, unquote. This should be what it's all about, honourable senators, giving Canadian artists and musicians and entertainers and journalists the opportunity to share their gifts with the world. We all want that. The world needs more Canada, but we don't achieve that by helicopter parenting Canadian talent. We don't give Canadian content producers the opportunity to thrive by choking them with regulations. Bill C-11 not only puts our Canadian digital content producers at a distinct disadvantage, but it may put a spike through many of their careers. It may prevent young kids like Hitesh Sharma or Tesher messing around with music on their computers in their homes in places like Regina across this country from ever reaching their dreams. That is why I will be voting against Bill C-11, and I encourage you to vote against it too. Let's give our Canadian content producers the freedom to compete, the freedom to achieve, and the freedom to excel. Let's give the world more Canada while also giving Canadians more freedom. Thank you.